Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we're going to be answering some questions that came to us via our Patreon Discord server. We do roughly monthly Q&A videos for our patrons who support us at Basilosaurus tier or higher. That's $15 a month or more. And we really appreciate all of the, obviously, we really appreciate all of our patrons, and we really appreciate all the questions you send us. I think this month there were a couple of pretty interesting and fun ones, so I'm looking forward to getting into the Q&A. But before we begin, a few reminders. Yes, reminders. This video will probably be up before we attend Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the beginning of April. And so in case it is up before then, this is our plug for we're going to Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin between April 5th and 7th. It's going to be super fun. Amelia and Scott have worked on some amazing new designs for like special exclusive merch things. They look great. We're flashing some image of them on screen right now, right here, or maybe over there. I don't know how you perceive this and if it mirrors my video or not.
Buy them.
Yes, and if you're in the Midwest area and you want to come get to see us in person at our first in-person event, you should come by.
Some
I
of
think
us.
it's going to be super fun. Some of us, yeah.
We're not promising to all be there.
Right.
It's
Right.
just
You will not get your
because
money
he
back.
hates you.
Unfortunately, I had pre-existing obligations for that weekend, but or not pre-existing.
Those
but
were not. I was about to say.
And I'll be there for
Post-existing.
one day, but I won't tell you which one, so you have to come to all of them if you want to see
right,
me.
exactly. And you have to buy merch every time, or else Alex won't come out from under the table.
Yes.
Um,
They'll put me
He's
back
like-
in my timeout box.
He's like the unknown. He'll be hiding behind the mirror. That reference is still.
No.
So anyway, you should come to the event. We're really looking forward to it. And if we do well enough financially at this one, we may do future in-person events. If this is financially ruinous for all of us,
You'll never see us again.
so make sure you come and buy some merch. I'm Dr. James Napoli. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at North Carolina State University and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
Okay. Good Lord. My name is Amelia Zietlow. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
My name is Scott Johnston. I am the vertebrate paleontology fossil preparator and technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology.
Hi, Scott. My name is Alex Rubenstahl, and I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University. And the moment that we stop recording this video, I will cease to exist, because none of us are real. We're all figments of your imagination. Also, every time that you wake up after you've gone to sleep, that's a new person. You die every time you go to bed. Every single time. You don't know because they have your memories, but every single time it's a new you.
The continuity of being is a mystery to us all. And so am I Dalton Meyer? Right now I am. A PhD candidate at Yale University.
This is
And
the
together-
the Dalton Meyer of Theseus.
I mean, how would you know? You wouldn't know. So why be afraid of it? It's just like being dead. That's what being dead is like, not remembering that you're the same continuation. Anyway,
Together,
we're the skeleton
Together.
crew.
we're the Skeleton Crew.
True.
And it's time for another patron
A quad.
Q&A. Let's get the ball rolling right away.
Yeah.
Our first question for the February Q&A comes to us from Nickname, who asks, what's everyone's best story they've heard in a field/prep lab that still sticks with you?
I can't tell any of them.
We're going to have the asterisk on this that we can tell.
That we can tell, yeah.
Because, wow. But, should I go first? I have
Go for
mine
it.
up there. So mine would probably be the time that back when I was at Michigan, we used to call the people who worked in the prep lab, the students and interns and volunteers and stuff who worked there, we just called ourselves the lab rats. And one year, a group of the lab rats had to call Bill Sanders, who was the and still is the head fossil preparator there, to bail them all out of jail. because apparently when one of them was leaving, they noticed that the sign for the museum was replaced and the old sign had been thrown in the dumpster. So a group of them were like, oh my God, I can take the sign home. And so they all got it and were just walking down the street with it. And a cop drove by and was like, what the hell? And arrested all of them for stealing the sign of the museum. And they were like, no, we promise it was in the trash can. And so most of them were not from around there. So they were able to call someone when they got to the jail, and they called Bill. Like, Bill, please come bail us out. And he did. And it was very funny. And there's a very good picture of all of them in the empty frame of the sign, all smiling. And that story is extra fun because history repeats itself. And that happened to me many, many years later, except I didn't get arrested. We were smarter. We learned from our predecessors they were switching out all the signs again because Michigan was going through a little bit of a rebrand. And saw the sign of the museum in the dumpster. And we just devised a plan to drive my car up there in the middle of the night with all of the lights off and somehow fit this like 8.5-foot galvanized steel sign in a 2004 Acura TL with 4 people in it. And then drive off at high speeds with still all of the lights off, blasting the Mission Impossible theme as loud as the speakers will go. And then I sent a picture of me and all of my derelict lab rat friends holding this sign to my dad, who at the time was the director of facilities for Michigan, to which I got a very panicked call from him right afterwards that was, Scott Robert Johnston, did you steal that? What the hell? And I was like, no, I swear, we have pictures that prove it was in the dumpster. And he made a couple calls and was like, technically speaking, that is okay.
Cool.
And it was very funny. That was mine.
So I have written down a story that I will do my best to tell. I remember, I believe I heard it my first year here, and my brain is Swiss cheese, and it becomes more Swiss cheese all the time. This is not the Ahab story, no.
I see.
This is a story from Jacques when he was going to the field in graduate school, and they went to Montana a lot, and at some point, I think every year during the field, they had a big bonfire. And someone, I don't know who, decided that the best thing to do would be to cook a turkey on the bonfire. And so to do this, they wrapped a turkey in foil and like kind of lightly buried it in the coals and then had the bonfire. And when they retrieved the turkey with like some kind of metal equipment, they found that they had cooked it at such a high temperature that the bones were no longer in the turkey. The bones were gone.
Where did they go?
That's an excellent question.
Just the bones?
I think just the bones were gone.
Wow.
And that's like a half-remembered version of that story. So that's all I got, but it stuck with me, at least that part.
I guess the moral of that story is, kids, if you kill someone, wrap them in tinfoil, put them in the desert. There's not going to be any bones left. That's the hardest part to get rid of. That's incredible. I thought you were going to tell the Ahab story. Nice.
No, because I don't remember the Ahab story well enough to tell it.
Well, that's also not ours to tell.
No.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Do you want to go next?
I wasn't going to jump into a story yet. I was going to say something,
okay.
and I forgot what it was. I'm trying to think of a good story. You go. I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah, as we said before, the problem with this one is I don't know which stories I can tell because I don't want to reflect poorly on any of my field mates. I have several brief notes. There's that because none of them are mine. I only half remember most of them. These are almost all from the Montana Carthage digs. One of them was apparently several years prior to me. a student was, so when you go out to Montana, you get a little bit of a heads up on how to traverse the land so that you do not accidentally grab a snake. Like, don't grab into crevices or climb without looking first and all of that kind of stuff. And someone apparently was like climbing up the side of a thing and felt the gust of wind and their hat was gone. And they got to the top of the hill and saw the hat curled up with a rattlesnake. The snake had grabbed the hat off their head.
Oh my God.
So the same person was involved in another rattlesnake story, which was like them and their field partner walked across. We're walking across the plains. There's a snake. It went off. Started rattling, and she bolted. And the other student stood there. Snake stuck him in the guard, the snake guard. Wear your snake guards, kids. And he panicked and kicked it, sent it wheeling through the air. Bolted back to camp and was like, Dr. Carr, oh my God, there was a snake and it bit me and she ran and I kicked it and it was in the air. And Carr just was like, why did you run? Don't do that. Don't kick the snake. There's a story that Carr tells every year that is not a field story and it's not his either, but it traumatizes everyone in the room because it's about parasites.
Yum.
Oh, it's fantastic. I cannot remember the exact sequence of events, but it was like these hunters were like, we're going to make this venison for you. And they're like, okay. And they're making the venison and they bring out the plates of things. And there's this one plate of things. And they're like, no, they're going to bring out, they're like, oh, you've had venison before. And they're like, yeah, but have you ever had the little livers before? And he's like, the what? The liver? No. And whatever, it happens, dinner happens. They're like, oh, you got to try the little livers. And he's like, okay. And this person brings out to serve a plate of liver flukes, which are parasites, which are bags of eggs. And he's like, this person freaked out, has like fled the home, had made an excuse to go to the bathroom, and has never spoken to this family again. The other one, which is the other thing. Okay, so as we drive out, I'm trying to remember this. Every year when we drive out from Milwaukee, typically out to the Hell Creek, it's a long drive. It's like 16 hours. With stops and everything. And so we develop...
It's nothing.
Well, no, there's
No,
things.
it ain't.
It's not nothing. What there is are billboards. And the billboards get fun. And the last time we went out there was a billboard that said, the wages of sin is death. And that became our mantra the rest of the 10 hours that we had to drive.
That goes hard.
It was really good. We the grammar was poor. We didn't really know what it meant. We kind of thought, we knew what it was saying. And at one point during this field season, we introduced it to everyone else in the house without explaining where we saw it. We just started saying it and people were freaking out. And there was a day where there was a really rough storm, and like storms on the plains are insane. They show up really quickly. The winds are really high. There's lightning. It's phenomenal. They're so cool. And we had the window open because we're trying to take advantage of the cold air. I think we were playing Uno or something. And someone very loudly yelled, the wages of sin is death, because they were like Uno reversed or something. At the exact same moment, there was a crack of lightning and a gust of wind that slammed the window shut and the power went out. And so we're like, oh no. Anyway.
That's really cool.
You've offended God.
We did, apparently. So there's so many more. And of course, the story of almost killing Brady with my pickaxe over the Pachycephalosaur dome, but you've already heard that one.
Cool.
So this is not really my story to tell. And so instead of giving an abbreviated version, I'm just going to be cryptic. If you know, you know, the beer tab is one of...
Phenomenal story.
Right.
One of the best stories that exists in the field.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
Great story our Patreons don't get to hear. Anyway.
Holy
It's great.
I know. Isn't it a great story? That's the best one.
I will now tell a tale. Here is my tale. Oh, there are so many good ones. So this is not a story, but I will say that there is a genre of paleontology story, which is someone steps away from the campsite to pee and accidentally pees and discovers a fossil. It happens a lot. Like you might be thinking in your head, like, oh, he means like 3 or 4 times. It happens a lot. Anyway, I will tell a tale. And I'm thinking on, this is not a story I've been told because my stories are my own because I live an interesting life. And this is not to imply that the other members of the crew don't live interesting lives because they also do, except for Dalton, because I live with Dalton and I know what kind of life he lives. He lives my life, which is interesting. So he's interesting. It all comes back around.
All right, we completed the circle.
This is a story about when I was in the field in Lesotho. And I won't say who this is with, but it was myself, 2 faculty members, and 4 graduate students. And we were excavating a Massospondylus. Now, that is a prosauropod dinosaur from the early Jurassic of that part, Lesotho, South Africa.
Don't you mean an early sauropodomorph?
Yeah, it's an early sauropodomorph. Shut up, nerd. So we were working the Massospondylus and parts of the lower, I think the upper Elliott Formation, of this really dense red sandstone. And the Massospondylus was in it, and it was taking forever to get it out with a little geological hammer. And even big picks. So we're like, all right, we got to get the jackhammer. So we get the jackhammer. We're bringing the jackhammer up the cliff. And it's fun. The jackhammer is fun. It's fun to go on the jackhammer. I didn't get to do it much, but one of the graduate students. I was actually not a graduate student at the time. I was a undergrad, master's, somewhere in that transition. But he's a friend of mine, and so my job is with the hammer to clear the fragmented, destroyed rock out from beneath the jackhammer. So you jackhammer for a bit, and you stop. And then I get in there and clear, and then jackhammer, and then clear, and jackhammer, and then clear. Because we're trying to get this block out. So I'm usually and we're wearing protective goggles to not get shards of sandstone in our face. So I'm kind of like prone while he's doing this, just to I keep eye level. And I watch an incredible slow motion as he jackhammers himself in the foot. I just watch this thing clip the side of his foot, and I kind of jump up. And he keeps going and then kind of stops. And he kind of looks at his foot and he turns it off and he's like, I think I hit my foot. This is, of course, viewers, what we call shock. Because then his shoe starts to bleed, basically. So
adrenaline's a hell of a drug. Oh my God.
Stumbling down a cliff. This is a pretty steep, we had to drive our 4-wheel little truck up an awful road to get here. I'm stumbling and sliding down. I'm getting the first aid kit. We bring it back up. We get a shoe off, and we're like, oh, well, there's no cut. Well, no, that's not really true. We're like, oh, where's the break? What had really happened was that he'd broken the bone, and it kind of came up because it didn't break the shoe. It didn't go through the shoe. It just shattered the bones in his, I think, pinky toe, and it just ripped up through the skin. Pretty gnarly
fracture. Yeah.
But it's your pinky toe, so what do you do? Anyway, I stayed at the site because I had to do excavating. But other members of our group brought him into town, and we were in a small village in Lesotho. And they were looking just for any indication of somewhere where they could get an X-ray or anything. And they drove around until they found, I think, a local doctor. The only sign in any kind of English in the village was a sign that said Chinese doctor. Because that's who worked there. They gave him, he got X-rays of the very broken toe, $4, nice and cheap. And there's a great photo that one of the students took of him, where he is receiving a general anesthetic because they're going to bind his foot. But they gave him it's just one of the big needles they put in your one of your butt cheeks. So there's a great photo of my friend with white knuckle just getting a little jab. That's one of my field tales. No one was implicated. Except if this person watches the channel and then knows that I've told this story.
Alex, I hope that you stay in a storytelling mood. Those are all riveting tales from the field. But our next question comes to us from Aaron Anderson, who asks, since you ran out of time in a previous video and couldn't do a follow-up question, Alex, what's the story about the horseshoe crabs?
I see. Time for another tale. When I was a wee boy, when I was at high school, I went to Greenwich High School in Greenwich, Connecticut, where I grew up, which is a public high school. It's a very nice public high school. There is it still is. There still is. There was a course you could take as a senior or a junior, which was called Science Research, Advanced Science Research. And the idea is you come up with your own project, you put it together, you run it, etc. One of the past students who did this invented flexible solar arrays, solar panels, and was given his own lab at Harvard after graduating high school. So, I didn't do anything that cool, but a lot of people were in it. People would go to science fairs. I was never really interested in the science fair stuff. I was mostly just like they would let me do stuff. But you couldn't work on vertebrates, which I liked. I liked vertebrates. I'm like, we'll work on invertebrates. I want to work with animals. So I did a little reading, and I was reading about trilobite eyes, actually. And I'm like, hey, it would be really cool to have like a actual test of horseshoe crab vision as something we could like hold up to compare to trilobites, which there's an overlap between what we call skizzy coral compound eyes, which are in horseshoe crabs, which are also seen in some species of trilobites. So my idea was I'm going to do visual tests for trilobites. This involved a series of poorly conceived, I was in high school, I was doing my best, of a number of silly things. One was ordering a bunch of baby horseshoe crabs off the internet, maintaining a tank for the horseshoe crabs, which they like dirty water, so you like have to get it a little dirty, and the filters could not handle it. I remember leaving over a Christmas break and coming back to like the room smelling like shit, disgusting, and they were happy. None of them died under my watch. They all lived. Anyway, this also involved me salvaging a rat maze from one of the science classes and then like waterproof epoxying it and submerging it in a huge tank of water because I wanted to see if we could do like a simplified, I got rid of a bunch of the walls, but like light-based and like shadow-based visual tests for horseshoe crabs and be like, can I coax them with different like rotting fish smells? Do they prefer shadows? Do they whatever? I was just trying whatever. Anyway, the story that I was alluding to was over the course. Oh yeah, also the conclusions of this were wildly inconclusive. They seem to prefer the shade, but there's no way to test. Like I did not have the materials to test for my more ambitious things. Doesn't matter. I fed them a lot of calamari. And I kept it in a fridge. And so I'd take it out and I'd thaw it, and they'd get like cut rings of squid, which they loved. And it was like late in the day, and I was kind of like tired. And I took them out, and I had these huge pairs of scissors that I used to chop them up. And I was cutting them like, it's still frozen in the middle. And instead of waiting, which I should have done, I just kind of like slammed into it with the scissors over and over again. And it gave. And you know what else gave? The tip of my pinky finger, which I sheared off in this action. I then kind of like walked, like, all right, that's happening. And I walked, so the room my tank was in and a lot of the active experiments were in was across the hall from the main classroom, which had all like the fume hoods and stuff. It was a well-funded high school thing. Anyway, I get across and I'm like just pouring blood down my arm. I'm like, yo, well, the guy who teaches this course, I shouldn't use his name, although there's really only one guy. Nice guy, great guy. I have cut the tip of my finger off, basically. And should I go to the nurse? He's like, yeah, obviously you should go to like. So, and then I got, they got it back. I got 18 stitches in like basically a centimeter of my thumb, of my pinky finger. And that's the horseshoe crab story.
It's a fascinating tale.
I was going to ask if you would have fed the tip of your finger to the horseshoe crab.
He's given them
the taste of blood.
Well,
no.
The takeaway here is that in this thread, Alex brags about not killing some of the most famously unkillable animals.
I gave them to the Marine Biology Club, and all of them were dead within like 3 months.
Oof.
So I'm just saying.
An excellent tale, and thank you for
I wish
telling.
I had anything interesting come out of my own high school science research experiences, but
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get any cool results, but I did get some cool stories.
oh no. Well, no, I got no cool stories because they were like, you should work on medical research. And I was like, I want to work on paleontology. And they were like, no, you should work on medical research. You want to win one of these science competitions. So I did medical research. And you know what's funny? I did not win. I did get an award. I did get like one of the nomination awards for like one of the best written reports, but they were like, it's not spectacular science. But you know who did win?
Who?
Somebody from a different school district who did a paleontology research project with Alan Turner, who I then later volunteered with the next year.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. Win, no, but like semifinalist is like in the Intel science competition was like the barometer of like winning or not winning.
I
like
would have rubbed that teacher's face and I'm like,
I wanted to. I was like, are you what? They were like, don't reach out to this paleontologist at the nearby university. You should be doing medical research. Last time I listened to anyone.
Your high schools had research?
We do.
Yeah,
we had 3 broken scales, like old school scales, and we had a couple microscopes, but only one of them at a time worked. And none of our AP Bio.
Where the fuck did you go to school?
Milwaukee public schools, man.
Alex, not one of the
when you guys say public school, I really do laugh. Public school in Greenwich, Connecticut
I'm aware it's a little different.
Oh, it's quite different.
This is going to turn into Amelia and I doing the Monty Python 4 Yorkshiremen sketch. That's just like, oh, you think that's bad? I used to wake up every morning before I went to sleep, and my dad would kill us. But also, Amelia, you would win that competition because shockingly, the Pinckney Community High School in middle of nowhere, bum Michigan, had such a weirdly good high school. It was bizarre.
We didn't do dissections because we had one closet full of assorted dead animals that were sometimes frogs. It's not like
you sure you went to a school?
The community hut.
Yeah. It was in one. We had 2 biology teachers, and one of them had a closet full of dead animals that were.
But you had 2 biology teachers, but 3 microscopes.
I think. I don't know.
Yeah, we had to share the microscope.
The microscopes were all in one class. Like they were not in both classes.
I see.
But also, it was a 6 through 12. So like there was one that was more of a middle school science teacher, and then a high school, but also like it's a public school, so we're not well funded. So they often had to teach both classes anyway.
Right, but had you considered going to a public school in a place that is well funded? Had you consideed that?
Alex,
my parents tried. They tried open enrollment. They tried to get me.
This is a bit. I don't. Yeah.
Now, Alex, what kind of car did your high school science research teacher drive?
A nice one.
Our next question comes to us from the man with no name, who asks, what's a lingering question or curiosity that some or each of you have about a specimen that exists in an institution, i.e. not in private hands, that nobody has published on in a while? Or if you can't answer that without breaking a channel rule, what specific specimen would you like to see further study on? There are several things that I want to see further study on that I'm not going to elaborate upon in this video, but what I will say just is that the Allosaurus that's on display at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science has a lot of like interesting pathologies on it that are pretty clear just from the skeletal mount. That it'd be cool if someone looked into that and like reported them. I don't think that anyone has, and I'm not a dinosaur pathology person, so I won't be doing that. But yeah, if anyone wants to look at those pathologies, they look cool.
A good answer, Dalton. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, similar thing for me. There's a lot of embargoes that I will not break. There's a lot of specimens that I am aware of that deserve more love, which part of the reason I'm working on most of them. So I'm not going to break my own embargo. But I will say, because I'm not currently working on it, that I wish there was a more recent study of the eggy allosaur specimens in Europe. The one in Berlin, or not Berlin, the one in Munich and the one in Vienna. Both of them, I think, deserve a high-res modern description. Because I think it was early 2000s or 2010s that they were last written up, and the photos aren't good. They deserve more. They're beautiful specimens.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, without bringing my own embargoes, because I'm thankfully I've been pretty successful in getting permission to study a lot of these specimens that I've been wondering about. But one that I'm not involved with that I really want to see some study on are a couple of dromaeosaur specimens in the collections of the Mongolian Academy of Sciences. So they're from the Bayan Sharif Formation. They are interesting, and I know they were worked up in somebody's thesis, but none of that material has been published yet. And so I'm just very interested to see what the results are, because given their age, they're probably pretty important for understanding the origin of eudromaeosaurs. They're kind of presumably in between like Deinonychus and then the late Cretaceous radiation in terms of evolutionary position, which would be important. So I'm excited to see work on them. But as far as I know, not much has happened since they were described in a thesis, which is not really part of the literature yet. So it's not really information that's supposed to that you can like cite in a paper, for instance. You can, but it's considered not great to do so for a specimen or a taxon that is described in a thesis.
Well, I would say to this that I have seen things you people couldn't believe. And I can't talk about any of them. There are so many things at the IVPP that are so cool, and you're just going to have to wait. Something I can talk about, though. Also, literally anything I'm working on is cool and interesting and needs to be described more, and that's all coming out. Don't worry. But something kind of to not to lean and copy James's flow here, but I'm going to. There's a dromaeosaur specimen I would like to see described in great detail, and that is the best fossil, one of the best fossils I've ever seen, the Saur ornitholestes in Alberta. Right? It's in Edmonton, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's
really, it's an incredible articulated fossil. The skull has been described a little bit, right?
I mean, it's got a good descriptive paper.
Yeah,
it's
the skull's got a good description. I'd like to see the postcranial described. I'd like to see it referred to more widely. I think it's going to have a lot of cool, exciting things to tell us. There's some croc stuff. Ooh, there's some crocs. No, but I believe in the esoteric nature of science. Saur ornitholestes. I'd love to see that specimen described more, but I mean, there's so much stuff. Like every second I think about this question, I'm like this, or that. There are some exceptionally preserved crocodilomorphs that I'm excited to see get published.
Indeed.
I'll actually, I've thought of one that I'll throw in here. I was inspired by your answer there, Alex. I'll say that the really, 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 really weird cynodont that I've mentioned on the show before, Protuberum from southern Brazil, that is one of the strangest animals I've seen in my entire life, and all of us were completely dumbfounded by it when we saw it in person in the tiny little museum down there. It was a great museum. It was just like, I didn't expect to see one of the weirdest things I've ever seen at this tiny little place. And I would love to see more work done on that. Like, what and why and how and who? Like, all of these questions.
And when will they find antituberum?
Casual tuberum.
All right. All good answers. Here's a question from Mayday, who asks, why does the AMNH have so much stuff in the Saurischian Hall talking about carnosaurs as a clade of allosaurs and tyrannosaurs? Why are they using a name that apparently they have to put in quotation marks?
This is a very quick answer, thankfully. The hall was constructed before the understanding of tyrannosaurs being silurisaurs was widespread. So remember that the AMNH dinosaur halls, while being kind of like very modern halls, they kind of set a lot of the design aesthetic that modern dinosaur halls have, were being constructed and planned out in the late 80s and early 90s. So the hall was assembled assuming that tyrannosaurs and allosaurs did form a clade of carnosaurs. They were able to change some of the signage to put carnosaurs in quotation marks to show that it's a paraphyletic or polyphyletic group. But because the AMNH exhibits are arranged in phylogenetic order and context, they would need to fully renovate the hall to break that association. And so they just haven't been able to do that yet. That's going to be a many $1 million renovation.
Yeah.
So it'll happen eventually. And when they eventually do renovate those halls at some point in the future, it'll be undone. But it's kind of an unfortunate holdover from the time that it was built and our evolving understanding of theropod systematics.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question comes from Cayman, who asks, since this is the month of Valentine's, where it was when the question was asked, I think the question would really fit the criteria. What's a mating ritual currently found in animals today that you think would reflect perfectly to certain dinosaurs, like when spiders eat the male or penguins offering a pebble? My initial thought was, I don't know about reflecting perfectly, but what I can imagine happening is I could imagine Spinosaurus doing something similar to some newts with like a fin on their tail, apparently do like a handstand underwater and kind of waggle their tail around to attract mates. I could see that happening. I think that'd be fun.
Amelia?
Yeah, I think I'm next.
Yeah.
Abelisaurs strike me as rock collectors, like penguins. Like, they eat concrete. I don't know. They've got that vibe about them. Like, they'll pick up a rock, they'll bring it to a friend. That's the energy that I see in them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll actually kind of dovetail off of Amelia's there. That it kind of shocks me how I almost never see depictions of Carnotaurus headbutting. And I could totally see them doing that for some sort of competition, mating display, something like that. They seem to be, of all of the ornamented theropods, they seem to be the one that's best suited for it. Maybe not full speed muskox tomfoolery, but at least like standing next to each other and just like having a big pushing contest. It's kind of like a rut like we see in like deer and antelope and stuff like that. I could see male Carnotaurus doing that.
So along the same lines as Scott, I would be amazed if a lot of these like large ornithischian dinosaurs, like especially ceratopsians, pachycephalosaurs, were not like kind of like harem breeders the way that modern elk and other ungulates are. With
heron.
Heron?
Yeah, I thought you said heron.
Like harem, where the breeding structure is normally that like there are usually single or a couple of males in a social group and a lot of females, and the males like fight for dominance and do all that sort of stuff. It just seems to kind of make sense from the vibe of these ornithischians. So it's what I've always kind of assumed it would be like, but there's not like any evidence to say for or against this.
And there never will.
Except maybe the fact that they lived in large herds, which tends to correlate with that kind of breeding structure.
Cool. Does it have to be dinosaurs?
No.
Cool.
Or the question does say dinosaurs.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to say no to your premise of a dinosaur, because I don't know, like lizards or birds or whatever. It doesn't really. I don't care. Pterosaurs though, they're doing some wheeling type stuff in the sky that would blow our minds to see. Like in air copulation, maybe that'd be wild. Like some of the incredible like weird courtship rituals that some large birds of prey do. Stuff that blow your mind. You'd be like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I bet they're doing weird stuff. Pterosaurs are weird. They're doing weird stuff. That's my gut. They also have, not to poo-poo any of my fellow skeleton crew members, mostly James, ideas about complex social interactions between dinosaur species. But pterosaurs, they have a big forebrain. So I bet they're probably doing some weird complex.
You heard it here, folks. Pterosaurs are doing weird complex sex.
I can't confirm it, but I do imply it.
Yes.
The next question comes to us from Dino Dom, who asks, what form of paleo media, dinosaur empire, bloodlines, agate, Kyoryu, are you most excited for this year, etc.? Scott, you had the first response.
Yeah, even though I really love everything that I'm seeing out of Dinosaur Empire, I think Kyoryu is the most interesting of these. that setting and the art style of those fantasy dinos is phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. We love it, folks.
I don't feel like I really have my finger on the pulse of like what all is coming out, and I know of some stuff that is in the works that I'm more excited for than any of this, but I don't think it's going to come out this year. From what was in the list, I'm most interested in Dinosaur Empire just because I'm a sucker for the Morris information. And I like the kind of conceit of the story it's trying to tell. But looking ahead at some of the answers that are written, I think James is the one I actually agree with the most. But those are my thoughts of when I wrote the answer down.
Well, I'm curious, what's the one James is excited for the most?
So my answer is I'm very interested in this T-Rex IMAX movie thing, which somebody in our Discord actually asked if we're going to do a trailer reaction to. I think the answer to that is maybe. We're very busy right now getting ready for MGC. And so I don't think we have a lot of time for extra videos, but maybe we'll squeeze one out. I'm interested in it for two reasons. One, I just think it seems to be a pretty cool replication of not only like the Hell Creek formation, but also earlier stages in Tyrannosaur evolution. There's at least one segment with Guanlong in it, which is neat.
That confused me in the trailer.
We do
It confused a lot of people in the trailer.
Yeah,
it was like there were Proceratosaurids in the Hell Creek? What the hell?
What the Hell Creek? But I'm also very interested because apparently they were following Tyler Leeson's field crew recording stuff in the field for this video or for this movie. And apparently he made some sort of exceptional discovery by chance while they were doing the filming for it, and it's in the movie. And the reason I'm interested in this is that despite the fact that I'm pretty plugged into the paleo community and I hear a lot of things, I have not yet heard a rumor about what this is. So yeah, just the fact that there's going to be I think that story behind the documentary is pretty amazing, and I'm excited to see what it looks like. It also looks like the dinosaur designs are great. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing it, which is more than I've said about a lot of these like IMAX museum only dinosaur documentaries in a while. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
You know, before when I looked at this question, dear audience, I thought to myself, I don't care about any of these because I watch movies that are cool and not for 8-year-olds. But
Jesus.
But
subscribe to our Patreon so Alex can insult your choice of question.
Hey, you know why you're signing up. This is not no, I'm being silly. I do enjoy some of these. And I'm excited for the Morrison one just on the possibility that I get to see a Silurus. I know it's not confirmed, but I'd like there to be a Silurus in there, and it's a time slice that maybe there's a little Halopus or a Meselignathus, a little crocodile morph, a good little guy.
Maybe a gecko.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I mean, maybe. I don't know. And it looks cool. And I like Stratosaurus too. So
yeah, I'm
excited to see what's up. And the others all look fine. The first thing I said was the mean joke to get a reaction out of you. And then I'm clarifying I don't really think those things. I actually have very few strongly held convictions at all. It all just kind of like rolls off of me like butter off a duck's back. Anyway, what are we talking about?
I mean, Alex, the T-Rex one, I know it's not a crocodile per se, but it is the first time I've ever seen a Champsosaur in media, which is neat.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And, T-Rex is neat. Everyone, don't let the haters get you down. And I like Guanlong because it's from the Shishugo, which is a cool formation. And also where Jungasukas is from. So, well, not exactly, but close. It's from a different place. But, similar time and zone.
Fascinating.
I will, to not be left out, I will say a similar thought to Alex's first, except I don't mean it in the mean way. I don't care, as in I just do not pay attention to media because I'm out of touch.
When she wrote it in the answers, it was meaner. She's just being nice now.
I did not. In the answer, it is literally just I do not care. How you can't misinterpret my words like that, gaslighting me. Good Lord. No, but it's like I don't mean it in the mean way. I just mean like it is not something I pay attention to. I am in a busy part of my career right now. I do not have time to engage with new media unless it is Dune.
Dune.
That's been the only new media I've partake in a while.
and it's the only one you need to.
Yep. That's the supreme media.
Yep. Yeah, fair.
Our next question comes to us from Kyo Doka, who asks, first one, given that there's, well, first one, so Kyo Doka asked several questions, and we'll get to them, I think, progressively, but just to clarify for everyone watching who's thinking of submitting a question, that we do limit it to one question per month. But given that there's a trend on YouTube for going through things in complete order, do you think a video series going through all the undescribed reported material on Wikipedia would be a nice side project? Given most of it's speculative, I'd be interested to see your opinion on it. So my take on this is I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it'd be very time consuming. And it isn't something I would want to do per se. It involves a lot of behind the scenes work of getting a sense of what the material actually is, maybe even visiting the institutions to see it. And then also importantly, figuring out if it's stuff that people are actively working on, if it's anything we could even talk about. It's a good idea, but there's just so many hoops to jump through to like make it happen that I don't think it's something that I would want to really pursue.
It's a good idea for you, the viewer, to do this. Because yeah, that's a lot of work.
Project.
Godspeed is my note on that question.
Yeah, I mean,
like, however much like undescribed material is reported on Wikipedia, there's 10 times as much undescribed, unreported material in museums.
Yep.
Especially if you work on animals that are particularly well represented.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, mosasaurs are much better represented than tyrannosaurs, but there's been like an amazing thing going through the collections of a couple of really, really, I'm still traveling right now. You may have noticed this is not my normal domicile. I'm currently at the tail end of my research travel, and I've been to a couple of really good museums, and the number of tyrannosaur specimens that have just never really been commented on in the literature is astounding. And so I can only, I know the situation's only worse for mosasaurs, but it's true of a lot of different groups. Like there are things where I'm like, this is a perfect fossil. I've only ever even seen it referenced. I've never seen it figured. So it would be even worse for.
It's even worse for other groups, I'm sure, like fish. Like I'm thinking right now of like several phenomenal fish specimens that I saw at the Sternberg Museum or at KU. Like the seaway like fossils in particular are. You'd be amazed at the things that are in the bowels of KU, like just completely undescribed pterosaur ? Like that kind of stuff. And then you look at it and you're like,
oh, cool.
Oh, no, there's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
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 But thank you for the question.
A good query.
Paleo AK92 asks our next question, which is, I had the amazing pleasure of meeting an invertebrate paleontologist recently, and something I learned was that there seems to be beef between vertebrate and invertebrate paleontologists. From what I gathered, it has a lot to do with invertebrates not being traditionally charismatic compared to something like dinosaurs. So, when a vertebrate and invertebrate paleontologist cross paths on the street, which one starts snapping and dancing aggressively first, and why? What other weird conflicts in paleo would most people not know about? It's a bummer to hear about there being conflict like that.
Well, I mean,
there's not conflict. We don't think of them at all.
Right. The invertebrate paleontologist is the one who starts snapping because the vertebrate paleontologist doesn't know they're passing an invert paleontologist.
No, I mean, there's not.
No, that rivalry, which I think Scott should take this one because he wrote some good notes on our planning doc about it.
Mm-hmm. So, firstly, I'll say, Paleo AK92, if I ever hear that you talk to a spineless bastard again, you're going to get kicked from a Discord. No, really. In all honesty, like, it really strikes me as a similar rivalry to, like, major sports teams or between, like, branches in the military, where it's almost a sibling level rivalry where it's like you're gonna give each other just by the fact that you are in close proximity to each other. But like we're working, like we're all working on fossils. We generally all work in the same buildings and like generally next to each other and everything. But like I've had so many times where like I've had lunch with the invertebrate paleo folks at Harvard and then saw that the vert paleo people had just gotten out for lunch and walked over there, and Stephanie looked at like gave me a side eye and was just like, "You're fraternizing with the enemy." And like we're all just like, it's just jokes. It really is. It's just all in good fun. I don't know many people that really actually take it seriously. And but if you do want to find people who treat each other with genuine animosity, look at people's attitudes towards theropod researchers, and particularly theropod researchers' attitudes toward theropod researchers. They're a bloodthirsty group.
It's wild.
I will speak to this because I have published invertebrate paleontology papers and will soon be submitting another manuscript. You can do, I would say the best paleontologists do both, to include myself as the best paleontologist. No.
Wow, what a generous description.
The best paleontologist.
It's not like, I guess it'll depend. There's a lot of depends who you're working with. Or an organismal biologist is an organismal biologist. Like, it's a little different. You have to learn some different anatomy and stuff, but it expands your mind. I think if there is any animosity at all, and I don't think, I don't want to speak for everyone. I hold no animosity towards invertebrate paleontologists. I think they're cool. Derek Briggs, awesome guy. Look him up. If there's jealousy from the vertebrate side, it's that we're jealous that they have a sample size, and an actual fossil record, and not like scraps, like dinner table scraps that have been pushed to a river bend. And if there's animosity towards VP people, it's that vertebrates get more money and are generally a little more charismatic. So I think like they often capture the public spotlight, which we're not like implanting that into the public consciousness. People just like a T-Rex, man. It's not our fault.
Well, and that's what I wanted to say is the only place I've seen this conflict be kind of real is in discussions of like what kind of publication outlets you can get into and what kinds of grant funding you can command and public donation and interest and all of that. And there is just simply a reality that some taxonomic groups resonate more with the public than others. That's not to say that you can't find something interesting about any study system. Like, I hesitate to use E.O. Wilson as an example because after his death, it turned out that he was a white supremacist. But he became
he was a white supremacist while he was alive. It wasn't just after he died.
No, what I'm saying is he found out about that after he died. Before he died, right, he had the reputation of being like this kind old grandfatherly scientist who studied ants. He was a very, very famous evolutionary biologist, and he studied a group that people don't really like a lot. What he seemed to have been good at in his career was finding like the interesting evolutionary questions you can ask with ants. And I think that that's a good model for the fact that I think every group has some interesting thing about it. I think with theropod dinosaurs, obviously the fact that they're ancestral to birds is like a huge hook, right? But every group has its thing. I think it is harder to do some kinds of work with some groups than others and get a lot of attention for it, but I do think it's almost always possible. That said, I can't say that I begrudge invertebrate paleontologists who are doing very important work on the history of life on Earth and like can't get a paper into the journal Nature. Whereas if you say basically anything about T-Rex, you can get into Nature.
Yeah. To get like an invert Nature paper, you have to discover like the Cambrian ancestor of an entire phylum that also preserves like its brain in perfect outline. Well, you know, what in any other group would be considered the best fossil ever.
The one thing I do want to say though is like that thing is not like a dinosaurs versus other sorts of animals thing. Like even ornithischian dinosaurs, it's very, very hard to land very high profile papers on them, even when you've done the same kind of study you have on theropods, because theropods have that kind of broad appeal.
They're big and toothy, bro.
I think that you can do the kind of like work to make people care a lot about your study system. And I don't think that that's impossible for any study system, but like those advantages are definitely there. And I think that the only real version of this conflict I've seen has been people saying it really isn't fair that if you're doing the same kind of work on different groups, you can have wildly different success ratios in terms of where you can get your papers into or how much money you can get in grant funding. And that is not fair. It's a reality that we do have to work within, but it's not a good thing.
Skill issue.
It's a skill issue, right? That's what it is. Thank you.
I would simply describe it in an interesting way.
I don't really have anything to add to this conversation. Everything I was going to say has been said.
Yeah, we've covered most of it. I think the only thing I'd add is like the reason that there are sometimes goofy conflicts and like, yeah, they're more concentrated in the theropod arena than not is just because like the people in this field have different personalities and different people get along in different ways and to different degrees. And with how small this community is, you wind up working very closely with people, and that can destroy relationships, you know, depending on who's letting who work on or see what fossil and that kind of stuff. And so I do want to say, like, not that any of these conflicts are like ever justified, because I think sometimes they get out of hand, but like there are often like real world reasons behind scientist conflicts in paleo.
And they're usually stupid, but sometimes not.
They are sometimes stupid, but it's like, so are conflicts in everybody's lives. Like,
right.
You know, it happens, but.
Right. One thing that I think is important to impress, and I just want to build on Amelia's point here because she's hit the nail on the head. Like, scientists are people. I think one of the things that may be an undercurrent in the distrust a lot of people have of scientists now is that their image of what a scientist is does not map onto reality. We're not like all heartless androids who just do everything logically and, you know, based on the data. We all like to say that we are, and I think we try to do that. But
no,
like,
we're not tech people. We don't work in tech.
But you know, it's difficult to do science. People have egos, people have desires, people have dreams, people have friendships, and people have rivalries and relationships and all that sort of stuff. And all of that happens within the field. And you know, I think science as a whole thing is a generally self-improving engine. I think that eventually you're working toward better ideas all of the time. But it's not like individual scientists are like, I will simply consider the question logically and remove any of my own preconceived notions or biases, or my own feelings about the people I work with, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
There are certainly people in this field I will not work with. Like, you know, right.
We live in the real world, not some moron show written by
Aaron Sorkin.
A certain Sorkin. Not a 8-year-old's conception of reality.
Yeah.
Have like, no heroes. Don't have any heroes in science. It's not. Don't do it.
Unless
they're us.
They're a member of the skeleton crew.
In that case, I would say maybe you're safe with 2 out of 5 of us. I'll let you choose.
Everybody leave your comments of which 2.
I don't like this.
Our next
both of them are Amelia's cat.
You trust him? He bit me on the leg today for no reason.
I trust him more.
So our next question comes to us from Doc Dino. This is a hard question, honestly. This is only one of us has written anything down because I couldn't think of anything to write down for it. It's tricky. Doc Dino asks, what mistakes have you made in your career that you think a budding paleontologist could learn from? And what areas of research do you think may see a boom in the next decade? If you're privy to unpublished material that relates to that, feel free to disregard that part. Amelia, go for it, because you've written a response.
Yeah, I'm the only one that wrote something, because I know, you know, the reason that viewer behind the scenes, we have a planning document where we sometimes write out questions ahead of time so that we're not fumbling on recording. You are mistaken. We are without flaw. We've never made a mistake, and that's why no one had an answer actually written for this. Which is, I'm going to be honest for a hot second, not entirely untrue. And I don't say that because like we are arrogant and all of that. But for me, at least, I feel like I have avoided pitfalls because I had good advisors. And like, that's kind of in this field, like, especially starting out, you have to be careful about who you trust your training to. Because really, like, especially as an undergrad or a high schooler, like, you don't know what you're doing, and you are really, really heavily relying on your advisor to make sure that you are following the right steps and not making a fool of yourself. So, like, I really want to emphasize this is not I have never made a mistake. It's like, I can't think of anything that I would call a mistake in the sense that, like, I would, you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of it, like, what, I am in a good program. I have set myself up pretty well. Like, I think everything's going fine, and the things that have not gone well have not been my fault or have not been the fault of my advisors or anything. It's that I started grad school in 2020. Like,
Yeah.
So basically, my point here is just to give advice so that you can avoid mistakes and have a relatively smooth path, as smooth as you can in this field. Is like first and foremost, find a good advisor, find a good mentor. It doesn't have to be someone in paleo. It could just be science more broadly. But like the skills that they teach you help you to avoid certain mistakes and just figure out how to better navigate the field. So like my advisor in undergrad was Dr. Carr. He gave us really good tips on how to send professional emails to people to ask about collections visits. He gave us tips on how to present yourself at a conference and how to behave at a conference, because that's something that as an undergrad, you don't know, what you're getting into when you first go to SVP or something like that. It's really kind of an interesting environment. And there might be things that you have to be aware of that you might not otherwise think about. And it's you need someone who can help you to learn how to navigate the field to avoid mistakes. They do happen and you can deal with them, but also you can deal with them better when you have an advisor who has either made those mistakes or has seen those mistakes happen and can help you to kind of course correct and deal with them. And so in my own, not that I'm officially a mentor, but I'm still connected to the Carthage Paleo students, and the things that I sometimes see them do that I would advise to avoid are freaking out about making phone calls or sending emails to professionals, or about reminding them. They freak out sometimes where they're like, I haven't heard from so-and-so in a month and I don't want to bother them. I'm like, you're not. My emails if I don't respond to your email in 3 days, it's buried. Please send me another one or I will forget again. Academics are busy. It is okay. And the other thing too is just to be really on top of deadlines, because that's how you avoid missing deadlines. Be on top of your deadlines. Make sure you know when things are due and how much time you need to do things. Leave a little extra time, and also make sure you read the instructions for grants and applications and things like that, because you will get rejected for the wrong font size. And I don't know if it was in one of these videos or something else, but it is kind of nitpicky, formatting things like that, but you just need to read the instructions. And and then the last thing that I'll mention too, that is something that I kind of learned on my own, thankfully, I think, without ending my career. But nowadays it's more relevant than ever, is that you need to be mindful of how you behave online. In paleo spaces, if you believe or if you think that you would like to pursue it professionally, because people remember interactions that they have online. And if they can tie you back to an old username or whatever, and they remember you being a dick to them, they will remember that. And that honestly could impact your chances at getting into grad school, getting grants, getting a job, getting access to collections, anything like that. Nowadays, everybody has social media. Everybody is kind of paying attention in Discords and Twitter and other spaces. You never know who you're going to be at the mercy of farther down the line. Even if they're just a grad student now, 10 years from now, they could be faculty and they could be on the hiring committee. And if they remember 5 years ago, you told them that they were full of and you didn't believe their paper, they might remember that. And like we said in the last one, scientists are people. These things, I've seen these things manifest in the grad school applications here, physically. At the Gilder School, because we interview a very small group of people. We do check out everyone's social media to get a vibe check of whether or not they're actually going to. Well, we don't want to admit somebody who's going to come in and make us all uncomfortable, right? So we check out their backgrounds in the school, and the school asks for our opinion. So tying back to scientists are people and paleo is a very small field. If you are interested in the field professionally, you need to be mindful of how you interact with others in the community, not just professionals, but other enthusiasts, other artists, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I have thought of my answer to this question.
I have as well, but I'll let you
yes, I am, but I can't answer. I appreciate the sentiment of this question greatly. Of what looking back on what mistakes would you advise people not to make? And the trick is, right, that a career is a lifelong, or most of a lifelong endeavor. And for most of us, we're at the very beginning of that. And it's tricky. I don't feel like I have had enough time to have the hindsight to know what mistakes I have necessarily made. So this is not to say that like I can't think of a mistake because I haven't made any. I'm sure I've made plenty. It's just tricky because I don't have a lot of hindsight to identify them and then be able to say like, hey, don't do this. What I will say is just that like in general, times where I have had things where, oh, that was a mistake, is often made by speed. Like there is a tricky balance to be found between doing things expeditiously and doing them well, and then doing them too slow. And it's a hard, like finding that balance is tricky. And I don't think I've done maybe the best job at that at times, or holistically even. But I do find that oftentimes more mistakes come from speed than the other end of that spectrum. And trying to do things quickly can lead to headaches down the line. So like take your time. This goes with most things. Like think about what you're doing, be thoughtful, try to be detail oriented. And that can set you up for more success. And I apologize that that's vague, but that's just kind of my thoughts on the matter. And then pursuant to the second part, where do I see a boom? I think in the next decade, I think we're going to see more and more molecular paleontology as those labs kind of get built and become more populated and developed. And I think that's really exciting. And what I hope to see is a resurgence in long form, large scale anatomical work. I don't know if we will see that, but I hope we do.
I hope so too. Now, so if I may right now, I think I might be in a slightly unique position here just because I guess I'm the furthest along into my career in the research end. And I've certainly spent a lot of my postdoc trying to reflect on grad school, where I don't feel like I was a model grad student a lot of the time. I will say I was with flaw. And I was like, I've thought a lot, and I think that I think Amelia's advice is very good, especially like I want to say, I don't disagree with anybody's advice here right now. I see a lot of Amelia's advice as being kind of like pre-grad school advice a little bit. And so I want to offer like a little bit of an in grad school, or like what I consider, I guess what my struggles were in grad school, because like social media interactions are a thing all the time. But I think also the younger you are, maybe the more likely you are to make a misstep on social media and how you interact with people. Mm-hmm. Like I'm very happy I did not have Facebook or Twitter when I was 16, and I wasn't talking to people in my field at that point. I didn't start talking to people in my field on Twitter until I was halfway through my PhD. So that's my own conceit. For me, what I find is that I think successfully completing a PhD and moving on is in large part a measure of like kind of self-awareness and confronting the things you're not good at very well. And I think I didn't do a good job of that for several years. So that's something that I obviously hinge on. I know that I'm somebody who doesn't like the discomfort of not knowing how to do things. And early in my PhD, I did not do a good job at figuring out how to do things I didn't already know how to do. This caused a lot of problems down the line because I had a lot of research projects that kind of had to be abandoned because they just were not done properly. I spent like 2 years not even knowing how to open a project in VG Studio to segment a file. And I just avoided ever having to do it, which
gave me papers.
It gave Alex papers. I was initially, when I started in grad school, I was intending to be trained in how to use the CT scanner at the AMNH like right away, like first 2 months of grad school, get trained and start scanning things. I didn't finish my training until like halfway through. And then right as I finished my training, the COVID pandemic started, and I had to wait several months before I could begin collecting a lot of the raw data that I'd been wanting to collect. And so I think like the only like generally applicable advice I would give is like, forgive the turn of phrase, but know what your bullshit is and don't do your bullshit. Like there are things you do well and you should do those. If there are things that you're not great at, I think that to some degree you need to like focus a lot of energy on doing them better. Pursuant to Dalton's point, I'm somebody who likes to do things quickly. That helps my ADHD brain. I like to achieve tasks. I have a hard time following through on really, really long-term things because I have a hard time just keeping the reward circuit activated. And so my initial couple of collections visits, I was working incredibly quickly, not really taking good notes, not photographing things, not scanning things or whatever. That's something I've had to actively like train myself out of and learn to do a much better job with them. The first real collections visit I went on in grad school was kind of a disaster. I got no usable data or information out of it whatsoever. I also concussed myself.
Awesome.
So, that was not good. I don't mean to sound like too down on this stuff here, but this is just like, I find it to be kind of important. And I think it's something that's pretty broadly applicable no matter what field you're in, but research is hard because it is self-directed. And, there are generally not a lot of external people kind of hovering over you, making you do stuff. And so a component of it is like learning the kind of skills required to pursue these really, really self-driven projects and make them happen. And that's hard. Like, that's not trivial. I think, we often joke about these papers that have never come out or specimens that have never been described. And like, it is hard to keep these things going. Some of these are decades long projects. It's tough. Yeah, that's my answer. Sorry for admitting flaw on camera.
No, that's fine. Like, I think Dalton actually summarized my point that I could not articulate in just that, like, I am not far enough along, to know. It's like, I've had undergrad and PhD. I've gotten into a PhD program, which is step one. I don't know how it's going to go. Like, we'll see. But to build on my previous point, what you just said, like, the other thing, especially with grad school, but also just in general is, and I see this happen in that when I tutor classes and no one shows up to office hours, don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's going to office hours, emailing your professor, emailing your advisor, whatever stage you're at, emailing your colleagues. Ask for help, because like, yes, you have to do a lot of things on your own, but part of doing it on your own is knowing who to ask for help with certain things that you don't know, and like, that is completely okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, get information. Like, I'm currently, listen, it's something I still haven't conquered. I've been putting off sending an email about how to use an R package I want to use for my research for like 8 months. And I don't need to admit to this person I don't know, who I've never met and never will meet probably, that I need to know something about how one of his functions in R works. I've contented myself to every 3 months Google it and see if there's a new help documentation that's appeared. And if not, I say, I'll pick up that portion of the project later. And don't do this. I'm going to send that email after we stop recording. Is what I'm going to do.
I would say, what would I say to this question? This is a good question. I have made mistakes, and I will take these to the grave, and I'm not telling you what they are. But no, everyone's given good advice. James is correct. No, you're both. I hate writing, but got to do it. But also, you don't have to know how to do everything. There are co-authors for a reason. You should not. I think we've said this about math in general. You need to know why things make sense via the world of math and statistics. But if you personally are like hopeless at putting together like an R package, it is not the end of the world. But when you read a methods section, you do kind of got to know what's up. I would also say, yeah, a good advisor is a big part of it. Obviously, that's something you're really not going to know till you get there. How do I say this? We kind of alluded to this earlier when we answered an earlier question, which is that, there are like beefs in paleontology. Part of being a successful paleontologist is not being a weird recluse or an unpleasant person to interact with. So like, and this is not like a haha dig at, like, this is not meant to be an insult or anything, but like, even if you're not good at it, you kind of got to be sociable and personable and like someone people would want to work with or be around.
Right. Or at least be kind.
Just be kind. Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't have to be a social butterfly like life of the party. You just need to not be like viscerally unpleasant to interact with.
Yeah. Other things, other important things to keep in mind. It's tempting to be very critical, like to be hypercritical of everything that comes out. I wouldn't recommend it. It's important to keep in mind that like everyone is kind of making it up, not like scientifically, but like everyone's kind of doing a little bullshit. Not everyone knows exactly like 100% of what they're doing. So like if you're going into something, you're like, oh, this feels a little weird. I'm like, it's all right. It'll get sorted. That's what peer review is for. That's what drafts are for. It'll get sorted out. but also we're all full of a little bit of. I don't want to say stay humble because that's so incredibly trite.
And you're so incredibly bad at it.
Yeah, I'm. Oh yeah, bad noise. I'm better than everyone.
Yeah, I think one thing that is probably worth adding on to, and this should probably go without saying, but in case it doesn't, don't, especially as your first action, go out of your way to screw other people over.
Yes.
Like if a museum tells you you can't publish on that specimen because somebody's working on it, don't.
Yeah.
Okay? Like you don't want to get a reputation for being somebody who doesn't play ethically. This is not to say you can't wind up in a scientific debate. And I think another key skill to learn is learn to debate ideas without being an asshole. It's hard. It's really hard, speaking as somebody who has had trouble with that in the past. But it's a good skill to learn that you should at least be able to walk away saying, at least I did not approach that conversation in a mean way, even if you vehemently disagree with what's being said. But I mean, like, the museum will often say, here's a fossil. You can look at it for comparative purposes, but you can't publish an image of it or publish like anything about it other than the vaguest observation. If you do that, they're going to be mad at you, and your career will have suffered an almost irreparable damage already.
Museums hold long grudges. Like,
yes,
if
they are institutions.
If there's anybody you don't want to piss off in the field professionally, it is museums. Like, you might be able to mend a relationship with an individual person, but an institution, no, you go on a list, almost literally.
Right. Well, I think some literally. Like, you know, if they can't trust you, they're not going to trust you. Right. And as I was told recently, I won't say which museum I was at, but I was at a museum within the past year. And I, you know, was asking about things that I could digitize or whatever. And I digitize things just the way other people take photographs. So I try to digitize everything regardless of whether I intend to publish it. And I said, like, is it okay? I just want to use these for my reference later. I find it much easier to use 3D models than photographs. And they said, yeah, like, James, it's okay. Like, digitize what you want to. But if you screw us over, you're never coming back. And I was like, that's a good rule. I like that.
I believe it was the same museum. It was the same thing with me. They're like, digitize, scan, whatever you want. Just don't publish on that one until so-and-so does what they're doing with it. I'm like, okay.
Right.
Easy.
And so I have data sets for unpublished specimens. I can't really say a lot about them, but, you know, now I have a record that I can use, so I don't need to travel, you know, internationally or across continents or countries or whatever to see that fossil again once it is published. But there's trust in that. And, you know, this is a two-way bridge that you need to not you definitely want to not burn immediately. And I also, as just a general piece of advice, don't push if they say not to look at something. Like, just the answer is that's okay. Thank you.
Well, I guess if literally everybody else gave an answer to this.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I thought we were just going to leave it to the one.
Nope, we have thoughts.
Yep. I, having taken a different career path to the rest of the crew here, I will say that I've made a lot of mistakes in the lead up to my career, but the thing is, it does feel weird to even look back at them and call them mistakes because they ended me up where I am now. And I like what I'm doing now and where I am now. And like the mistakes that I made are so, to use phylogenetic terms, they're so basal in they're near the bottom of the tree in the possibility that would be what Scott Johnston would, the crown Scott Johnston would end up being. That it would be. No, it's so basically I would say that to remove all of the layers of artifice that I was attempting to build up there. I started off my education thinking I was going to be a researcher and really wanting to be a researcher and not knowing that I had dyslexia for so long and doing horribly in classes as a symptom of that and not really finding out what happened with those. And it wasn't even like necessarily like, well, actually For some of it was me very much putting my head in the sand and not wanting to actually address a lot of the things that were wrong with the way that I was operating. Really, I think possibly closed a lot of doors to me. And I don't say that as someone who, like, I don't regret any of the things necessarily. There are things that, oh my gosh, let me rephrase that. I don't regret where I am now. And I don't feel like I'm a fossil preparator because I couldn't do research. I love what I do. I love where I work. I love working in fossil prep. I have had thoughts of just like, oh man, if I knew that I had these issues a bit earlier, if I was open to getting the help earlier, what would I be doing now? Would I be a fossil preparator? Maybe. Would I be a researcher somewhere? Maybe. But one of the things that one of the pieces of advice that I would give people is, besides that, hey, social stigma is a son of a, and even if you think that, like, hey, I'm a pretty mental health forward person and like I understand that things can be they're like, oh, a lot of people have all these stigmas around things, but like, oh no, like I don't judge any of my friends for seeking help for any of their mental health things. It's a different ball game when it's yourself. Swallow your pride and be receptive to help that other people offer you and seek it out for yourself. And I will say, in tandem with that, listen to yourself in the sense of know what you're good at and what you like doing. Because I know that I've had several times in my career where I thought my career in paleontology was entirely completely over before it even really started. And because I wasn't doing what I thought I should be doing. And if I had actually like just given in to all that and just, I don't know, go become a go back to school and get a marketing major or something like that, like I wouldn't be living the life that I very, very, very much like right now. So
you'd be married with a house and finance.
Yeah, it's like I was attempting to say earlier that like these errors happened so early in my career that it's like, it's not even saying like, oh man, I would have done this thing instead of that thing and I'd be right there. I'd be a fundamentally different person. I wouldn't have met any of you guys. I'd be a whole lot happier because of that.
Yeah. No, don't laugh. Don't lie. We all know it's true.
Scott, if you hadn't met us, you would not have done a 60-hour round trip drive earlier or about a month ago.
I've told that story like 3 times. It's rad.
It's a good story.
But yeah, like I would be like such a fundamentally different person that it's hard to make any sort of comparisons. But like I am happy with the way that my life turned out, and being able to actually listen to what I wanted most, which is basically it boiled down to I want to work with fossils, whether that's working in a prep lab, whether it's working in research. Like I probably wouldn't, I could have made a good researcher. I wouldn't say I would have, but because I haven't done much of it, but I could have made a good researcher, I think. But I'm making a very good fossil preparator, and I'm very happy with the fact that I am.
Thank you for all the thoughtful answers. Skeleton Crew got kind of real there for a moment. That was lovely. Our next question, to lighten the mood, comes to us from JP Lover 16, who asks, what is your favorite fossil mammal, and why is it not Leviathan when it clearly should be?
A whale? Oh, wow. I've never seen a whale before.
I mean, that's kind of my...
Oh, a sperm whale? Oh. We killed those with sticks.
So I'll kick this answer off by saying I chose a different whale.
Cool one, though.
Which whale?
I chose Basilosaurus.
That's a better whale. I've never seen a whale like that.
Because it kind of spawned the career that I have now. I hold it very, very close to my heart, and it's also a big, weird, goofy critter that is like strikes a fun balance to me between being incredibly bizarre looking and also intimidating. Like, its teeth are huge and horrifying, and like I've seen the bite marks on Dorodon skulls of like the way that this thing must have destroyed stuff. It would have been horrifying, but it also is it's a noodle. It's really, really, really weird and way longer than like you would imagine is reasonable for an animal to be.
It's kind of unserious in that way.
It's very unserious, and I think it's one of the main reasons why like almost all of the paleo art of it looks wrong. Like I've only seen a couple like really, really good depictions of Basilosaurus that make it look like a real animal. But and if it's not that, I'd say maybe a Calicothere, because I have a tendency towards the goofier critters.
Those are both very good answers. Mine, and I'm going to preface this by saying, if you ask me this next week, my answer might be different. Like picking favorites is hard, especially with stuff you don't like spend a lot of time with. Right now, as I'm thinking of the question, it's probably either like Archaeotherium or maybe Daedon. I do really like Entelodonts. I think they're cool. They're cool looking. I wouldn't want to be around one in real life. They're terrifying. And once the statue of the one at the Denver Museum that grunts at you, it intermittently grunts, and you can't really predict when it's going to do it, scared me so badly as a child. It's a terrifying diorama, but it's great. But yeah, I like Entelodonts. For me, for the Leviathan in the room, it's not Leviathan because I do think it's very similar to sperm whales, which are cool, but like I can see one if I watch a video. I'm not going to go to the ocean to see one. But also because when Leviathan came out, there was so much like hype in paleoseries, like, oh, could it beat Megalodon in a fight? This could beat like, this is the whale that killed Megalodons. This is the thing that beat Megalodon in a fight. And I'm gonna go on record. The only thing that could beat Megalodon in a fight was the climate of the planet. All right, cool it with everything that's anti-Megalodon sentiment rubs me the wrong way, because it's just like, you can't appreciate a giant shark. What's wrong with you?
They're not Pokemon. Come on. It just clicked in my brain what my favorite mammal is, and I can do it quickly. I do think a big whale is cool. So I said earlier, Lamau, it's just a whale, but it is just a whale, so it can't be my favorite. It's got some cool teeth. Who cares? Baleen's cool teeth. Whatever. However, what's important for me when choosing my favorite extinct mammal, and this goes for actually a lot of groups, is what shape doesn't exist anymore in like modern fauna. And when I'm thinking of mammals, the thing that doesn't exist anymore are ground sloths.
They're cool.
There's no 20-foot long thing that can decide to be a biped for a little bit that also has a big tail and like armor on its back and just giant arms with hooks on them. And like, that's a Megatherium. That's awesome. That's so cool. I'd love to see one of those.
Yeah.
That's my answer. Kangaroos don't count. Don't come at me with kangaroos. Those aren't the same.
They're not the same.
That's me. I'm done.
I have it alternates a little bit for me between, I mean, my two favorite like living groups are cats broadly and horned things broadly. So the answer that I wrote down was Homotherium, because there is a specific skull in the collections at the AMNH that like I'm just always drawn to. It is so big and so cool. And they've got just like this chunkiness to them that makes them different from like Smilodon. I feel looks like a normal cat with big teeth. Homotherium looks kind of alien. Like the face is long, it's kind of blocky. It's just gross. But in a cool way. So I like it quite a bit. And the other one is solely because of how it's mounted at the North Dakota Museum in Bismarck, is Bison latifrons. Just because it's absurd. And at the North Dakota Museum, they've got it mounted, like, beating the shit out of two Smilodon. It is so cool. Like, it's, I think, literally throwing one. Like, it is and it's massive. It's like the horns are like 10 feet across. It's bonkers. It's so cool. And I think bison are, as a group, very much overlooked in terms of research potential. I know there are some there is good work being done on them, but like at the AMNH, there's an entire room of these things. Like I wish someone would do some like individual variation, high detail study of them, because like talk about sample size, like there's a ton of them.
Oh yeah. I have 3 answers, and I'm going to say them rapidly.
Wow, one up us again.
Well, he is the most mammal-associated man. I can
I've
forgive him
published
for
on
this.
mammals, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, my favorites aren't any of the ones I've published on, to be clear.
Let me be clear.
I did really like the other night in our chat, Alex, when you were like with tired delirium, being like, "Oh my, like, you know, did you know that there were bipedal kangaroos?" And I was just like, "Yes, I published a study showing they were bipedal."
Lamau, I didn't know.
So anyway, I have 3 answers. The first of these, and Amelia, you and I saw this mount at the same time when it became one of my favorite mammals. Cervalces. There's a mount in the New Jersey
I was
State
thinking
Museum.
about that too. Ooh.
Very, very cool. I like deer a lot. I think they're very, very cool animals. They are one thing. If I had not studied dinosaurs, I probably would have gone into extinct ungulates. I think they're just fascinating. And just knowing that there was like a moose with giant, like broad fallow deer, like nearly megaloceros sized antlers that just lived in like the east coast of North America. It was very cool. I have a real soft spot for like the extremely recent fossil record just because of how depauperate we now know our ecosystem is. Right? You know, this is an animal that just lived alongside moose and white-tailed deer and coyotes, but also alongside mastodon ground sloths and horses and rhinoceros.
It almost looks like it has moose antlers, but upside down. They're really weird.
It's a really, really cool animal. And there's a beautiful specimen on display in New Jersey.
Cervalces Scotty. It's a good name.
Right. And that's who it's named after. Scott Johnston, vertebrate fossil preparator and fossil technician at the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology. Did I get that right?
No.
Okay. Wait, what?
It's not fossil technician.
Oh, it's just technician.
Yeah, it's vertebrate paleontology, fossil preparator, and technician. You said preparator and fossil technician, so you just, yeah.
Okay. Well, it was close.
Yeah, it was a good gift, yeah.
Yeah, partial credit. So the other thing that I'll say is just a general love is all of the extinct rhinos, kind of echoing Alex's thoughts about like shapes that don't really exist. Right, like rhinoceros used to be such like the modern rhinos are part of an amazingly diverse group of like cursorial animals and these other herd dwellers, indricotheres, which got enormous in size. That's just a really interesting thing to me. My favorite of these is Teleoceros because when I was in college, I went to the AMNH with friends, and after our second full day of tour of the AMNH, we were all tired and delirious. And one of my friends from college rounded a corner and saw the fossil mount of Teleoceros and screamed at the top of his lungs through the exhibit hall, "Guys, look how long this rhino is." Like
the longest rhino you've ever seen.
It was the loudest he could have possibly spoken.
There are less kinds of rhinoceroses around today than ever before.
Yeah. So Teleoceros is a favorite, but my real favorite fossil mammal, just in the vein of the sample size, direwolves. There was a time when, you know, my work on individual variation is like kind of a through current of my career. And there was a time where I wanted to do a postdoc that kind of left dinosaurs behind entirely. And I wanted to go to the Page Museum in LA and do a postdoc focused only on the intraspecific variation in these huge data sets of mammals that you can work on.
Cool.
Yeah, it would have been, I mean, it would have been a different career. And I don't say I wouldn't say I regret not doing it, but it's something I always think about as like a really cool project to make happen. So I love them. When I was at the Page Museum finally about a year ago, my girlfriend took several pictures of me just staring mesmerized at the wall of direwolf skulls.
And a dog.
What?
Sorry, I'm just being dismissive.
It is amazing. Listen, working on dinosaurs where like sometimes there's one whole dinosaur skeleton, seeing literal hundreds of direwolf skulls on a wall with just this amazing amount of subtle variation between them.
Are they all like the really cool black La Brea color? Ah, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty rad.
They're striking. They're really, really cool.
The dark dogs.
Wait, I forgot to include in my sloth answer that while Megatherium is also cool, the underwater, the aquatic sloth also satisfies shape that doesn't exist in nature anymore, because that's
It
wacky.
is. I'm gonna
Marine sloth, dumb.
in the vein of things that I would love to see. It's not tremendously different than an elephant, but it's different enough. Platybelodon, like
with
with just like a big shovel mouth. I want to see that. That'd be cool.
No,
The
that's
freaking
great.
SpongeBob teeth.
Yeah.
It's
I hate
especially
that thing.
especially
Whoa,
also
whoa.
from chatting with my mentor at Michigan, who just published a book on Proboscidean evolution. It's rad, actually. Most paleo art about it's wrong. It wouldn't have had the weird like trunk lip fusion thing. It probably would have had a separate trunk, because that's just developmentally how that works.
I don't even know what that would look like. Send me a photo.
No.
Yeah. Well, like it's hard to find because everyone always does it as like a big, like wide upper lip trunk fusion thing.
Cool. See, this is neat. You learn. Here's my advice to our viewers, and something I do, which is I'm currently scrolling through every Wikipedia page about every living thing. Sometimes learn about something that's not in your study group, or just the thing you really are hyperfixated on. There's a lot of really cool stuff in literally every domain of life, except bacteria. I don't give a shit about that. If I can't see it, I'm not really. But even that's cool to someone. But yeah. It's always I'll always hear something about a fish or a mammal, and I'll be like, "That's wild." My frame of reference is a pretty limited sample of reptiles, so there's a lot of really fantastic and fascinating elements of living things out there.
Mm-hmm. Our next and final question comes to us from ISU 152, who asks the Elasmosaurus video and Paleo AK92's November question inspire me to ask, what kind of CFD simulation software do paleontologists usually use? And I believe CFD in this instance is standing for computational fluid dynamics. I don't know. I've never done that.
I did a little Googling, and I think the answer is, for at least some recent papers, is Fluent ANSYS, which I think Fluent is all capitalized, so it probably stands for something. So it's an analysis program for computational fluid dynamics. I am sure there are others, but this is not an area of the field I'm really familiar with. And as far as I know, it's kind of fallen out of favor in vertebrate paleo. I remember when I was in college, there were a number of papers of like computational fluid dynamics through the nasal passage or various things like that.
Oh,
and it's kind of gone away. And I don't know if that's that is that people realized it wasn't the best way to do what they were doing, or if they kind of answered all the questions that it could be used to answer at the time. I think either's possible. I don't really know. But Fluent ANSYS was at the very least used in studies of like nautiloid swimming, which is a good use for it, for sure.
A lot of Silackers kind of like faunal position stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Like how things would like land in like a water current and stuff like that are pretty cool. Like, and didn't Larry do some stuff with like ankylosaur stuff? Or am I thinking of something else?
The nasal is what you're thinking of, I think, like the
that's what I'm thinking.
The nasal flow stuff, yeah. Larry
There was,
Weaver's lab did a lot.
The aerodynamics of an ankylosaurus.
it's none.
Hey, that's a
No, there was
robust result.
there was a recent paper. I'm going to try and find their methods, what they used, just because you reminded me of it by talking about invertebrates. Is that there was the paper on it's called Raptorial Appendages of Anomalocaris. Russell Bicknell and colleagues did this, and they used computational fluid dynamics to simulate how Anomalocaris was swimming and how it might have been, positioning its little mouth guys, its little tentacle dudes. I'm sure the invertebrate people will love me calling them tentacles. I think that the raptorial appendages of them, the little, and they seem to use. Maya was used for kinematic analyses. Finite element analysis. Sorry, folks. Computational fluid dynamics. ComSol Multiphysics version 6. So that's another option if you're interested in doing CFD, I guess, is this COMSOL software. We have none of us done this, and so we can't speak with much authority.
Yeah. I think this is something, it sounds like it's much more used in the invert paleo world right now, which makes sense because a lot of those are swimming animals. But anyway.
Anyone else got any parting thoughts?
Thus concludes our February Q&A. Thank you, everyone, very much for your questions.
Good questions.
Indeed.
Yes, and so I want to briefly thank many of the people who can ask us questions. And some, well, not many, but not all, because we are going to give our verbal shout outs to our patrons at Gorgosaurus tier and higher. So everybody in this tier can ask questions, but there's also another tier that you can join, which is Basilosaurus tier, if you are interested in submitting questions for our next Q&A, which is the March Q&A. We are currently taking questions for, and will be until the end of March, which may be before this video is out. And if that's the case, you can submit video or questions to our April video, and we are desperately trying here. We appreciate all of your patience with the Q&As coming out. But anyway, I would like to take this moment to thank Benjamin Siepser, nickname Philip Fico, AK92, Christopher Bellis-Jones, Adamolos, Dan O'Kyrus, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, original username Pythonic, Swamp Ape Science, Wanderer, and Wheat for all of their support for the channel. Again, the support we get on Patreon goes a really long way in helping us keep these videos coming out and taking the time to make them good for you guys. And we really appreciate all the support you give us. If you're not able to support us on Patreon, we completely understand, but we would really appreciate it if you like this video and leave a comment on it, so let us know what you think. And of course, if you're one of the couple of hundred people who watches all of our videos but doesn't subscribe to the Skeleton Crew, I simply recommend.
What's the matter with you?
Skeleton Crew, right? It would be cool of you, and it would make us happy to see that number go up a little bit. So, reminder briefly that we're going to be at Midwest Gaming Classic in April 5th through 7th in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If you're within a reasonable distance, you should come see us there. And if not, we will see you next time in our next scheduled video. And our schedule has gotten increasingly chaotic, and I have no idea what video is going to come out after this one. But whatever one it is, I bet it'll be a good one.
Oh, yeah. You better believe it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You better believe it, son.
Well, thank you all, and have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Or a morning, whenever you watch this. Have a good time.
No, have a good night. You have to wait if you watch it early.
Pause it. Wait. Oh, there was a cat. Oh, I hope we keep the cat in. That was nice.